Tua Tagovailoa exposes Brian Flores or points out the fact that Mike McDaniels is the man. We'll get into that and much, much more right now on Locked On NFL.
You are Locked On NFL, your daily NFL podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in to a Wednesday edition of a Locked On NFL. And by McDaniels, I mean McDaniel. The point is he's the man and I shouldn't disrespect him. I'm James Rapien. He is Chris Carter. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code Locked On NFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Chris, let's dive into this right away. Tua Tagovailoa has become one of the better NFL quarterbacks. He got paid. He went from the 5th overall pick to people thinking he was a bust to now people maybe questioning how much he got paid, but realizing that he is a really good quarterback and leading the NFL in passing yards last year. And he had some interesting comments recently on the Dan Le Batard show. And this was on Monday of this week. He said, and this had to do with Mike McDaniel, had to do with Brian Flores, said, quote, "To put it in simplest terms, if you woke up every morning and I told you you suck at what you did, that you don't belong doing what you do, that you shouldn't be here, that this guy should be here, that you haven't earned the right, and that you have somebody else tell you, and then you have somebody else come in and tell you, dude, you're the best fit for this. How would it make you feel listening to one and then the other?" You see what I'm saying? And I think we can see that in Tua's play when he was with Brian Flores versus Mike McDaniel, but it's wild that it's that obvious and that Tua was willing to go on record with this because it says a lot about the early stages of his career.
It does. And it makes me wonder, how serious was this situation? We've heard other tough spots where like guys like John Gruden would blame quarterbacks for everything when things went wrong. And it makes you wonder how serious that was under Brian Flores, because again, this is just, Tua's account versus what Brian's account might be. But, hearing this, it kind of adds to, why Tua hasn't had the best starts in the NFL, and maybe Mike McDaniel is someone helping him. And it also makes you wonder because there was always talk about this too, but Brian Flores didn't want Tua. He didn't think that Tua was the right move. What was the right fit. And then when he was forced to keep him, that was a challenge. But also, I think that one thing that happens is, coaches, sometimes you have to deal with guys that you necessarily didn't want because you get overruled by your GM or by your owner and things like that. Historically, the Steelers, Bill Cowher wasn't going to draft Ben Roethlisberger. The Rooneys stepped in and said, "No, you got to go get that guy." And Bill Cowher didn't make gripes about that. In fact, he loved Ben Roethlisberger, and of course, he made it easy coming in and winning the Super Bowl in his first 2 years. But still, there's a point where as a coach, you gotta kind of adjust to the weapons that you have at your hands. And if Brian Flores didn't, and not only didn't, but then discouraged the guy and was mentally beating him up a little bit, that's not a sign of a good coach, and that certainly is a problem if it's true.
You know what this kind of hammers home for me? I want an offensive mind around my young quarterback. That's what it does. I think because offensive minds can find the strengths, and they know that their job is dependent on making Tua great. Maybe Brian thought, "Oh, well, if I win despite this bad quarterback, I'm just going to be here and I'll be able to survive this quarterback and get the next guy." And an offensive mind, I think, would realize that his success, failure, job is tied to the 5th overall pick. And Brian should have felt that way anyways. Players last probably a year longer than coaches, GMs usually, and in an attempt to get the most out of them. We've seen that across the league for many, many years. But yeah, if you were taking the guy 5th overall, even if you have your doubts, if you're Brian Flores, you got to try. And remember, it was weird. It was like Ryan Fitzpatrick is starting.
Yeah.
And we thought early on, and we're going to get into this about Drake Maye and New England coming up in a bit, but we thought it had to do with the hip injury and it had to do with health. Maybe it didn't have to do with health with Tua at that stage. And it had more to do with Brian Flores and his lack of trust / belief in Tua. By the way, if he had believed in Tua, I think he would still, at least, and there's a lot to it, but I think there's a decent chance he's still in Miami because clearly Tua Tagovailoa is a good NFL quarterback.
Yeah. He's certainly shown he's a playmaker, that he can play within a system, that he can get the ball out. I mean, he also, and they surrounded him with talented receivers. They went and got him Tyreek Hill, who was voted the #1 player in the NFL in the top 100. I got him Jalen Waddle, who I'd say is right in that position of being a top 10 wide receiver, like in the Brandon Ayuk range. So, you get guys like that around a quarterback, tell him he's a lot better than what the last guy did. I can see that stepping up. And so, yeah, it kind of calls into question, maybe to your point about offensive-minded versus defensive-minded coaches. Now, there's the thing. There's also defensive-minded coaches that don't trash their quarterbacks to their face, like Mike Tomlin. Mike Tomlin, inherited Ben Roethlisberger, and under Mike Tomlin, Ben Roethlisberger's numbers skyrocketed compared to what they were with Bill Cowher. And Mike Tomlin's always been a defensive-minded coach, but he also knew how to talk to his quarterback and be like, hey, there were times where there was one game they were going up against the Ravens in the playoffs, and Mike Tomlin said, they have the #1 defense in the world. And he said, yeah, well, I got you. And it was like Ben Roethlisberger used to feed off of that type of things. And that's where I think, again, if this is true and we're taking Tua at his word here, that's terrible for Flores not to get behind his guys. And I think it's a sign why he's a defensive coordinator and not a head coach anymore.
The other thing, and this is a big one, sometimes franchises, and the Dolphins have figured it out, and they're a playoff team, and this isn't specific to the Dolphins, but sometimes franchises stay crappy because the front office, ownership, and the coaching staff are all on different pages.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I'll just make up a scenario here. Let's say I'll use Brian Callahan in Tennessee because they have a young, unproven quarterback. We don't know what Will Levis is. If ownership really wanted them to draft J.J. McCarthy, but the GM and Brian Callahan were bullish on Will Levis or are bullish on the chance of developing Will Levis, and then ownership drafted J.J. McCarthy, do you think J.J. McCarthy or Will Levis would be set up for full success? Well, the only way would be is if the coaching staff and the GM got on the same page as ownership, backed ownership, or vice versa. And that's what's tough is these situations. Sometimes these prospects get thrust in these situations where it's really tough to overcome. And there are some guys that can do it because they are just that gifted. There are others that need an offense built around them, which isn't a knock. It's just the reality of life for 99% of the NFL population. And Tua is in that 99%. The good news is he found the right guy in Mike McDaniel, and the rest is history. You have anything else on the Dolphins here before we? You mentioned the Steelers a couple times here. We're going to get to them, and I think it's a good tease. Do you have anything else on Tua?
Just that I think that it'll be interesting to see how Tua does with McDaniel moving forward, because I think this further paints a target on the back of a guy like Brian Flores, who had been doing well flipping around the Vikings defense, and doing some innovative things with them. So all things considered, it certainly has added some spice into the NFL. Granted, not like the Dolphins and the Vikings are going to play each other every year from now on.
No, they're not. Clearly, Brian Flores thinks that Stephon Gilmore is better than Tua Tagovailoa, so enjoy that. Sorry, Stephon. You're a Super Bowl champ. I didn't mean to take a shot at you. Up next, though, let's get into the Pittsburgh Steelers battle at QB. Will it be Russell Wilson? Will it be Justin Fields? Get the answer next. You've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel. It's America's #1 sports book. Well, we have something a little different for you, and you got to take advantage of it, because if you're listening to Locked On NFL, if you're watching Locked On NFL, well, this is the offer that you've been looking for. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers, new, old, 3 weeks, 5 weeks, doesn't matter how long you've been a member of FanDuel. You go to FanDuel.com/lockedon, and all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. A 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV at FanDuel.com/lockedon. All you have to do is make a $5 bet. And with a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every single regular season Sunday afternoon out of market game All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel at any time. Again, just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon to download America's #1 sportsbook.
All right, James, we're going to dive into my neck of the woods here, and that's with the Pittsburgh Steelers, where I have been attending all the training camp practice. And in fact, soon after this, I'm headed back to a regular practice where they are going to be at their South Side facility. But everyone and their mother thinks that they know what's going on with the quarterback situation. You know, Justin Fields, look at the way that he's dodging sacks in this game, and he's able to make plays here and there. And the big question is Justin Fields now the starter for the Pittsburgh Steelers? I want to give you a chance from the outside looking in, James. What do you see as a person observing from afar? You're covering Bengals camp, so you don't have all the time in the world to look at it, but you hear the hoopla. What's your read on this situation?
Well, the other day I saw Justin Fields throw a deep ball, and then the receiver, I forget the receiver's name.
He was a guy that will not be with the team.
I had a feeling. Jumped on a trampoline and still wasn't able to make the play. It was the weirdest play ever. And then the play that was batted at the line and almost intercepted, and then he
caught it himself.
Like it was just weird. That's all. So those are the plays that stand out the most, and I'm sure a lot of people saw those. Here's what I would ask, and it's pretty simple. Do they want stability or do they want to roll the dice? Because we know what Russell Wilson is at this stage. We know exactly what he is. Mm-hmm. There isn't a ton of upside there, but I think there's a high floor. With Justin Fields, I think you have all of the athletic upside, but the floor is, oh my God, the receiver had to jump on a trampoline and that looked weird. Or this ball is going to get batted in the air and it's going to be, you're going to look funny. You're going to fall. You're going to end up on Shaq and a Fool a couple of times with Justin Fields. So which one are you going with? And I think of the Pittsburgh Steelers. I think of Mike Tomlin. I think of the winning record year in and year out. And I think he wants stability. I think he wants a high floor, not necessarily, or a reasonably high floor, and isn't as worried about the ceiling given how this team is constructed. I may be wrong, but that's been my lean the whole time, which is obviously leaning towards Russell Wilson.
No, I think that's where the Steelers are right now. But I'll say this. One, on that pass, at live, I was covering it, and like when I saw that ball sail over that guy, I was like, oh my goodness, that is not a good look. But then I did look back and they slowed it down.
It was a decent ball, right? Could it have been caught?
Well, the thing was, it was a post route, and this was a guy who literally they signed like last week just to fill in as like a practice squad guy in training camp. And like it's a post route, and he stops the post route. Like he stopped, waited for it, and that's why he tried to jump so high. Whereas if he just kept running, maybe he would have caught it. It looked close. Like it was towards the back of the end zone, and he stopped at the goal line. So like that was kind of weird. But either way,
he really trusts his vertical, man. He really does.
I was like, oh boy, like that's why you're not making the team, sir.
It's that Ross Jackson vertical.
Oh, Jesus Christ. No, that's that Lauren Corn vertical out of Locked On Bears. Lauren's tall. But
yeah, but can he jump? I don't know. I think Ross could jump.
Okay. But talking about Fields and Wilson, thing is that I think there's a lot of anxiety because the Steelers' first team offense, whether Fields has run it in the first preseason game or Wilson has run it in the second preseason game, hasn't scored any points in the preseason. Granted, the Steelers' first team offense last year scored every single time they touched the field, not just score, they were touchdowns with Kenny Pickett. And so I think it's important to remember. And James, we'll get into more of this about the Drake Maye situation with the Patriots. I think part of the thing here is that a lot of people are looking at the preseason and they're not evaluating things in like I think a realistic way, the way teams are. I don't think teams go into preseason games like gotta win this, gotta do. They're trying to get certain looks and say, okay, these are the things that we've been struggling with in practice. Let's see how this works against opponents, and then let's see what things we can develop here and there. They're not trying to sequence their plays. They're not doing things that will always translate into a live game. They're trying to run certain looks, see what certain guys can do. Like, for example, run thing I know right now, the Steelers, a lot of their run game that they're working on, they're trying to get Zach Frazier, the new center, to see what angles can he get to the second level on versus even man and odd man fronts. And so they're calling certain looks to just test that right now versus what they think might actually work if they just consistently called it for their offensive line. So when it comes to Wilson and Fields, I don't think either have really had that much of a chance to really operate the offense as it would on a game day situation, unless you see, like, when they do try to sequence things in practice. And even then, it's kind of we haven't really seen Russell Wilson. What people need to remember too is, and I've said this if you watch Locked On Steelers, Russell Wilson barely ran with the ones through most of training camp. He injured his calf early on, and the Steelers took that as an excuse, or not an excuse, but a reason to give Justin Fields more and more time with the ones just to see what he had. They wanted to work out the kinks. And Justin Fields went from a very erratic passer to a much more consistent guy. I mean, it was kind of crazy. The two days before this game, I watched the joint practice, and the Steelers carved up the Bills. Russell Wilson was throwing touchdowns. Justin Fields was throwing and running for touchdowns. The run game for the Steelers was on point. And then it was like all of a sudden, like they were a little bit different, when it came to the game. And that was a live practice that they were doing together just 2 days before. So I don't put a whole lot of stock in the preseason numbers right now. As far as this is still Russell Wilson's job. I think if Justin Fields had gone out in this Patriots game and he had led like 3 straight touchdown drives with the second team, then I think there'd be some discussions. They could be like, well, wait a second here. Maybe we are developing something with Justin. But I think what Justin has done is he has shored up a lot of the fundamental questions that they've had about him, but not enough to like beat out the fundamentals that Russell Wilson has had that has made him a 12-time vet with 9 Pro Bowls.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. And by the way, if Wilson stinks, if that floor is lower than I'm saying, they can always turn to Justin Fields. What you don't want to do is put a guy in who's not ready, who isn't as comfortable, and is going to lose you games early on and get you off to a bad start and put you in a hole. And so I think it's Russell Wilson. To me, I just think people like the young unknown, and then you got the fantasy football element to it. And Justin Fields is more fun. But is he a better quarterback? The answer is no. Now, the best version would be Russell Wilson's experience in decision-making and feel and instincts. And you just take all of those things and put them into Justin Fields. Yeah. Because that's a top 5 quarterback.
Yeah.
Like if you do both with his physical traits, he would be awesome. And so maybe the Steelers are hoping, and they probably are, that some of those things just rub off on Justin Fields as he watches a guy like Russell Wilson, who's been in the league a long time, has had a ton of success, isn't the player he once was, but is still a quality player. Man, it is the quarterback show. It's Quarterback Wednesday here on Locked On NFL. You mentioned Drake Maye. Will Drake Maye start for the Patriots? He's making a push, but Jacoby Brissett firmly in the mix. We will get to that coming up next.
But first, we'll remind you that this show is brought to you by Game Time. Game Time is the place that you need to go to, the app you need to download right to your phone today to get tickets to all your favorite events. With summer winding down and fall almost here, it's a great time to see live concert, football games, and get ready for the MLB playoffs. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite events even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. One of those deals is the 50% off Labor Day tickets for Diamondbacks versus Dodgers. Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all your sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. One feature I love in the Game Time app is what's called the Super Deal, where it finds you a combination of the best seat for the best price available, whether that's front row at a concert or club seats at the big game. Plus, the Game Time guarantee means you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section or row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference of those prices. Snag the tickets without the stress with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase, or go to their website, gametime.co. Terms and conditions apply. Create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed.
All right, let's get to Drake Maye. Will the Patriots start the rookie, the 3rd overall pick, the guy that honestly looked looked the part, continues to look the part. Gerard Mayo, the head coach of the New England Patriots, that's still unique to say. I think I'll get
Yeah.
used to it this year, but
Yeah,
still
I'm
unique to
not.
say.
Mm-mm.
But
Still weird.
will Mayo turn to May? I think there's the headline right there. But Mayo did say earlier this week, we still don't know right now. We have another preseason game, and then a week after that, when I know, I'll let you know. Here's what I think. I think deep down he knows. Usually you know. And
Yeah.
It's, do you want this veteran standard setter in Jacoby Brissett, who, similar to Russell Wilson, doesn't have a super high ceiling, but has a pretty reasonable floor, like you know what to expect? Or do you want to watch the young guy make some mistakes? And do you think he's ready to go out there, get his feet wet, and learn how to play in the NFL? I think that's the question. It's not about winning games right now. As weird as that sounds, and maybe for Mayo, it is about winning games. And so if you do that, you're probably going with Brissett. But it's tough for me, and we talked about this last week, it's tough for me to say no to the young quarterback when he's there and you drafted him with a 3rd overall pick.
It is tough, and especially because you want the future to be here a lot sooner than you would expect. Like, like, hey, let's get a look at this guy. This is the franchise guy. This wasn't just a late 1st round pick. This was a high up pick in this draft. And you have to ask yourself, what's the best situation to get this guy in? Because part of this also is you want to send your rookie in there and give him the best chance to build his confidence, right? Like, the Steelers last year, when I covered them, like, they didn't want to throw in Broderick Jones in the first half of the season, or because the Steelers are facing like a gauntlet of like Myles Garrett and Max Crosby and Nick Bosa week after week after week after week. And so they waited until like midseason, and then they said, okay, now we'll bring him in. And then he had a pretty good rookie season, blocking a right tackle for the Steelers. But with the Patriots, is that necessarily the case? They lead off with the Bengals. James, as much as the Bengals I do think are going to have a resurgent year, I'm not sure their pass rushers or their defense is going to be their calling card. The Seahawks, similar. The Jets, that's a tough defense. The Niners, tough defense. So maybe there's some things in there. But I think that that some of this might be similar to the Fields Wilson hype, is that people are seeing the preseason and thinking, wait a second, there could be something there, because Drake Maye right now in the preseason is 8 of 14 for 66 yards, no touchdowns, but no interceptions. Whereas Jacoby Brissett is 3 of 10 for 17 yards with no touchdowns and 1 interception. And maybe people are saying, oh man, I don't know about this. But James, I don't know. And I'm not tapped in like Mike Diabate, over at Locked On Patriots. I'm not seeing every practice and all things there. But I remember hearing stories in the early parts of camp that people felt that Joe Milton was the better quarterback than Drake Maye at one point in training camp. So I tend to think Jacoby Brissett will be a good placeholder. That's kind of what he was brought there. That's kind of what he does in the NFL. It's kind of what he's always been. So they're probably going to let Jacoby Brissett start the season, get a feel for things, let Drake Maye get used to the pace of how they prepare every week. And then they might find like a sweet spot for him to get a good start, like maybe against the Jaguars or the Titans or the Dolphins, but maybe get him past the Jets and the Niners in back-to-back weeks, and then let him start at home against the Dolphins. Maybe that's, I think, is the plan to ease Drake Maye into the situation.
Yeah, I lean that way. It is kind of similar to the Justin Herbert, Tyrod Taylor scenario.
Yes, very much so.
Like, Justin Herbert was this raw athlete, like coming in, and
everyone knew.
Turns out he should have been starting the whole time, right? And Tyrod Taylor was like the high floor. Obviously, you know what you're getting. Pros, been a backup, has just been around these top picks, and it has done a great job. And heck, I like him in New York. I thought that was a good get by the Jets behind Aaron Rodgers. But yeah, overall, is Maye Herbert? That's the question. It's really about Maye more than anything. Is he ready? Are you going to stunt his growth by throwing him out there early? Because some guys that hurts. Other guys it helps. They need all of those reps. They're not going to get down or be bothered if they have a 3-pick, 2-fumble game. Is Maye that, or does he need a little more seasoning and then someone you bring in when you're 2-6? Like that's the question for me. And I think Mayo is probably has the answer deep down, one way or the other, which way he's leaning. And it does feel like Brissett, but who knows? Because I don't want to rule out playing a top 3 pick because I would have picked that guy hoping to start him week 1.
Right. And I mean, ultimately, when you pick anyone that high, you hope that they're available right away because that's a huge investment for your team to try to get things better in quick order. And who knows, maybe their offense is suited right now to do this. But you also have to ask, how good is the Patriots offensive line? How good are the Patriots weapons right now? Are they in a situation where this offense can click with him in it? And I think that's another thing that you look at is like with the Texans last year, they had weapons that they could put around CJ Stroud. They had an offensive line that they were able to trust to kind of keep him upright. But that versus like Bryce Young, where the situation that the Panthers were in. What's better for the development of your quarterback? Will he be under siege, every time he drops back, and that can dampen a guy's development in the NFL? Those are the things the quarterback, the head coach, has to decide on. And I think, like I agree with you, Mayo knows what he wants to do. He's had this idea all along. But I look at how this could play out, and I think that there's going to be that cushion area where they let things kind of settle in, because there's also, again, a whole new offense, a whole new system. I assume that they might want to give him sort of like an easy path to say, like, hey, this is how a veteran quarterback prepares for the week. This is how the veteran quarterback's running this offense. Now that you have that picture, now that you've warmed up, that you've gone through the walkthroughs for a few weeks, now we're going to throw you out there and give you a chance to start. So I think that's the normal path for how to do this. But who knows? Maybe Drake Maye is ready to light it up, and I'm not in Patriots camp, but if he does, good on him. But like you said, it's going to come down to Jerod Mayo and how he feels about the whole situation.
Yep, we'll see. It's one of the many storylines. I will say this: of the two, I think the scarier one, I'll be covering Patriots Bengals here in Cincinnati week 1. The unknown with Drake Maye, at least to me, scarier than the known. And the proven. Yep. Now, you can't risk your future for a game, but just something that I would mention there. Make sure that you hit that subscribe button by checking out Locked On NFL on YouTube. Follow wherever you get your podcast. That's going to do it for Chris and myself this week. But we have you 5 shows every single week right here on Locked On NFL. And until next time, for Chris Carter, I'm James Rapien. Thank you so much for watching and listening. Locked On NFL.